Hey everyone. I was doing electrical work in my basement and I came into a situation where the wiring that was acting as my line going into the receptacle and outlet that I was going to connect was actually a multi-wire circuit line. So here you're going to see that it's got two hots and one neutral. The black is hot, the red is hot, the white is neutral, and then it has a ground. When you're connecting to a GFCI and it's not going to like a light switch or a ceiling fan or anything like that, you can't connect the two hots because then it's going to overburden the circuit. It's going to cause a power surge and you're going to get a break in your fuse. So in order to be able to connect this properly to a GFCI when you don't have that additional combo where it's like an outlet and a light switch, the way to connect it properly so that you don't have an issue with your power is you're going to use the red and you're essentially going to cap your line and your load black hot together. Before you do anything with electrical, obviously turn off your power. If you know exactly what breaker or breakers that your wiring is hooked up to, then you can just terminate those two or shut them off. If you don't know for sure, then best practice is just to turn your main breaker off so that the whole power supply to the house is shut. When you're working within a wall, in my case, I was in my basement, so I knew exactly what was line, what was load, and I'll explain that in a second. If you don't know what wire in your wall is supplying power, which is essentially the line side, versus what side continues that circuit across the system to say like the next receptacle or next outlet, which is called the load. The way to check that is you shut your power off, disconnect your wires in your wall, make sure that you have them, coming pretty far out as far as you can get them, and really just straight. And we know that white is always going to be neutral. Red and black are always going to be hot. That's basically the way it usually should be. But go ahead and cap them off. And I mean, even if you want, you can cap off your whites too. But you basically would cap off your red and your black, which, on this side, we're going to say we find out as the line side coming, we'll say like directly from the electrical box, going into the outlet, providing the power. And then we're going to say that we're going to find out that this is the load side, this other line here. So you have your line in, load out. We're trying to determine that right now. But same thing, like you're going to have, in this case, a single black hot and a single neutral with the ground. So here, same thing, you can cap off both, cap off just the hot, make sure that it's, far enough out, not touching the wall, not touching you, but go ahead and kill your power, or I'm sorry, go back to your box, turn your power back on. And then what you would essentially do is break these two so they're separated, take an indicator, and then check your black and your red and your black here. Whatever one makes this turn red and beep is your line in when your power is on. Whatever stays green and silent is your load out, and that's how you'll know which side is feeding the power into your outlet and receptacle and which is taking the power and carrying it out to the next receptacle, next outlet, next light switch, whatever it's hooked up to. When you first start doing your work too and you cut your power, it's always important to make sure that you check to make sure you got the right breaker. It's very easy to think you got the right one or you're not sure, you're reading what your descriptions say, and you're like, okay, that looks like the right one, turn it off, you start messing around, and then you have a big issue. So before you touch anything, best thing to do, if you have exposed conduit, and you could see the casing, like in my basement, I could see the casing. So I was basically just going and checking for, solid green, silent, or beeping red. If I still got beeping red after I killed what I thought was the breaker switch, then I knew I got the wrong one. So went back, turn off another one. Best practice is really just to kill the main power breaker in your box, shut off everything in your house. This way you have no issues. And then obviously like that would require a flashlight and all that, but it's probably safer. Anyway, I knew what my breakers were. I just didn't realize that it was connected to two until I saw that red multi-wire circuit. So I had to kill two at the same time, and that's when I was able to get my solid green. If you're in a wall and you can't run this to see if you're getting any red, like I was in my basement. So if this is sitting in a wall, that's where you would want to have the wires coming out at a safe distance. Either straight forward and like a little bit tilted out or not. So initially, like when you shut it down, you want to make sure you got the right ones, check it, then cap it, go back, turn your breaker off. Turn your breaker back on. After you've capped it to figure out what's your line, what's your load. This way you're, safe. You're not going to run into a situation where you could potentially get electrocuted. But that's essentially like how, I would do it if it was in a wall. But anyway, to connect these two into the GFCI, you cannot put both of these hots into the outlet, in any outlet for that matter. It can only be one. So essentially the way to get this to work, and in this case it was in my basement, so again it was purely visible. I was able to see what was going in, what was going out, so I already knew that this side was my line in, and then I added this wire as the load. So I was crystal clear on that. But the way to continue the circuit to keep a balance and equilibrium with the current is you take your two blacks, your two black hot wires, and you go ahead and you cap them together. So that's step one. And that keeps these two hots in balance and continues the circuit there into your next receptacle, next outlet. So I'll just show you outside of the box. It'll just be easier that way. So I'll put these two together. I'm going to cap them. And I just want to make sure that I don't really have much copper showing. If you do have copper showing, by the way, it's okay to trim this a little bit more. This is demonstration, so I'm just going to go ahead and put these two together. Let's get that a little bit more secure here. So go ahead and just cap them, right? So you're going to cap them together. You shouldn't see any copper poking out. It basically should just pretty much be as close as possible to only seeing the black casing. And I'm actually just going to trim this down a little bit. This way I can have a clearer show of what I'm trying to do here. So you would basically cap these two together, right? So now if you look here, the two are now connected. So that's going to continue the circuit and current for these two hots. And I don't have any copper showing here, so I feel good about that. The manufacturer's instructions and guidance say that you should basically twist this and even pre-twist it, so that you get a good braid where the two wires are really locked in, almost like a DNA, pattern. But you basically keep on twisting it, and then essentially these two should pretty much, twist together, and that gives you confidence that you have a really good twist. The other thing to do while the power is off, of course, so all this is being done with the circuit, shut down, the breakers that connect these wires, whether it's 2, 1, it's completely shut. You're checking to make sure that this isn't going to come out. Make sure it's nice and tight, okay? So that's step number one. With getting this set up to connect to a GFCI. Next thing you need to do is identify on the GFCI, and I'll try to put this closer, what is line and what is load, all right? That matters because the line carries the electricity in to this outlet. The load brings it out and continues it to the next receptacle, next outlet, carries the circuit and the current. If you put your line side, so in this case, we've identified that this white with the red and the black is the line. So that's coming out of the box, or it's coming out of another outlet and then going into this box to continue the circuit. If you put this in the load side, you're not going to have this outlet working properly. It's probably not going to provide any power whatsoever. It's going to be dead stop, and you won't even be able to use your indicators here to check and test. You might even get a red light here, possibly. Some of them do that. Some of them just, it doesn't do anything. In this case, when this is set up correctly, I get a green indicator. So I would know that I was good to go. I can visibly see that, but then I can also, after I'm done setting this up, check my wires. So I'll get to that in a second. But again, on the back here, you're going to see you have line and you have load. All right. Older models of GFCI outlets had them in the opposite sides. So on mine, it's going to have the load at the top and the line at the bottom. Older models had line up top, load at the bottom. So mine's going to be probably different than yours, maybe not, maybe it will be, but you have to make sure that you identify that so that you know where you're putting your wires in. All right. You also have the hot side and the neutral side. So the neutral side, it's labeled here neutral white. Hot side, it's labeled hot. You'll also be able to identify based on the screw metal. So in this case, like you have a silver screw versus a brass screw. Brass is always going to be your hot side. Silver is going to be your neutral white side. All right. So just to recap, we shut off our power. We identified, we opened it up. We capped off our red and our black wires because we have a multi-circuit. We're trying to figure out in the wall, in this case, what's supplying power into this receptacle and into this outlet, and what's going to continue to carry it out, right? So in my case, I was in the basement. Very easy to identify. I can see it. When you're in a wall, not so easy. So first thing you do is you're going to turn your power off, disconnect. If you have an existing outlet, disconnect that, unscrew and take the wiring out. Then go ahead and make sure that they're out of the wall, far enough away where they're not going to touch anything or cause a situation where a current can carry. So just make sure that they're out. Have your power turned back on, whether you have someone helping you or you just run down, do it yourself. Come back up. And then check to see where you're getting a red indicator, and that'll identify where your load is. I'm sorry, where your line is, in terms of like the two wire conduits in the wall. So when it lights up red, that's going to be line in supplying power. If you get a static green like this and it's not red beeping or blinking or just red, that's your load side. That continues the current in the circuit to the next receptacle. All right. So in this case, we'll pretend that when we touch this, that with the power on, the breaker switch to actively producing voltage, that this is going to beep red on both the red and the black, right? So we know that that's the line in, and then we know that because this has no current way of getting power pushed to it, because it's disconnected from a box and from the outlet, that this is going to be the load, right? Because it's dead. There's nothing happening here on the black. Okay. All right. So next thing, turn it off again, recheck your wires, make sure that you're not getting any red on any of this, just to be safe. Again, you might make a mistake. You think you turned off the right one, you didn't. So always make sure you're checking with this and not with your hands, so that you don't run into a situation where you could potentially get electrocuted or something like that. So always check. You should get a solid green, at least with this model. This is the Klein Tools, picked it up at Lowe's. So I should get basically exactly this when I touch these wires after turning off the breaker. Okay, so the breaker's off. Next step was you were going to put these two blacks together because you have to continue that circuit. If you were to take both the black and the red from the line and try to put it into the line hot side, you are going to oversurge your circuit and it's going to trip your breaker, right? You can't do that. You can only have one going in, and then you need to keep equilibrium. So the way to set this up to make sure it works correctly is only use the line. In this case, you do not need the load because you have a multi-circuit, you have two hot wires. So what you would do here is you're going to put in your hot side. So hot side for me is here. On the bottom is my line. This is my line hot right now. And I'm going to just put it right into that line hot side. And then I would go ahead and I would screw it in. Okay. So let's say we did that. We got it screwed in. This is nice and tight, secured. We're good to go. Okay. You give it a tug also, make sure that, this isn't coming out. So at this point, this should be locked in, screwed. and you shouldn't be able to get this wire out. It's important that you do check that, because there's times where you think you have this screw as tight as it can be, and for whatever reason, it's actually not. So when you go to tug on it, you start seeing it, slip out, right? You'll see it basically push a little bit, and you'll know it's not good. So then put it back in, loosen it, and then try to screw it in, and just make sure you get it as tight as you can, so that when you pull on this, you're getting that resistance where it's not coming out, okay? So that's that. To get the neutral hooked up, again, you're only going to use the line side. You are not going to use the load. And what you're going to have to do is create a pigtail. They now have adapters, and they may have been around a while, but I've really just recently been seeing them a lot. But it's an adapter for pigtailing, where you can put your line and load in, and then you use a donor piece of neutral wire. So in this case, I had extra little wire that was clipped because maybe I had, too much, sticking out in terms of like how much wire I had. So I clipped it. So I went in and I said, okay, I'll use that as my donor. Went in, identified where the white line is, and then I just snipped it, right? So now I have that. So in this adapter that they have for the pigtails, it's got, 2 ports that you can put your line and your load in, and then it has a third port where you can put this extension that then goes into the receptacle, or into the outlet, sorry. And then it's got little tabs, plastic tabs that you close down, and it locks it in place. This way it's nice and secure. The other way to do it, old school, is to just create a pigtail, which is what I'm going to basically do right here. So that's where you're going to take the line and the load, neutral, and then your extension, so all 3. You can pre-braid it, meaning like wrapping them around together so that they start with a good, braid. Not required, but best practice is probably to do it, just so you don't get a situation where, you can't lock them into place. And I will say it's easier to do this when you're working kind of forward facing, but go ahead and just take the 3, and then, whether this sticks or not, the point is you want to make sure it's nice and tight. This is demonstration, so I'm not too concerned. But you're going to tug on it. You're going to really tug, right? Make sure that you're good to go and that it's locked in, okay? So now you have your line at the bottom. You have here, right? So line, and then this is your hot side. So we're going to say that we've screwed this in. This is super nice and tight, right? We have no issue there. We've locked it in place. We're good to go. You're going to take your pigtail and you're going to put it in your line neutral side, right? So it's going to go into this other port here, and then you're going to screw that down. And then same thing, you're going to give it a tug. You're going to make sure that you're not getting slippage like you're seeing here, that's not moving from where, you've locked it in, right? So now your white, in this case, we're saying we've now put it in this side. And obviously this is all being done in the box. You're not going to get as much movement as I'm getting, but I'm just trying to do this for illustration purposes. But you're going to get that, pretty much as far as you can in there. If you have any copper hanging out, then, clip the wire a little bit, just to make sure that, all of your copper is there, and just the casing basically is what, you see. So it should be pretty much like in there, pretty deep in that port, okay? So you got those 2 together, and then the last thing you have to do is you have your grounds. And I don't know if it matters what order this is in. I'll let one of the electricians who might be watching this video comment on that. This might have to go first. It might not matter what order you put it in. The electricity's off anyway. So, as long as that's off, then you're good to go. What you will do, though, is you're going to obviously have to put these 2 together. So you can do that by using one of those pigtail adapters or a wire nut, right? So you can have a donor piece, maybe about like 6 to 8 inches. This is too small, but just for demonstration purposes, where you put those together, right, and pigtail it like you did with the white. You can use one of those pigtail adapters that has 3 ports that you plug your line ground and your load ground into, and then you put the extension into the third one, and then you put it into your ground screw, which is the green screw here. Everybody should know that, but just in case. Or you can just use one of these. It's called a greenie from Ideal. I picked it up at Lowe's. It's pretty cool. It's got a hole in the top. And basically what you do is you take your two wires together. You can pre-braid them. You don't have to. Probably best practice is you should, but you don't have to. Essentially what will happen is the one ground, doesn't really matter which one, should be longer than the other one, and then you'll just basically screw it down. You should have enough depth here to where you have a good amount, so that it's not causing an issue when you're going to put your outlet into your box where like you're having a hard time, because this is obviously putting space behind it. So you want to make sure you have enough, so that when you go to push it in, probably something like that. I don't know. Put it all the way down, right? So that you have enough so that you can, work your wiring back into the box without, having issues where it's not screwing all the way. But anyway, you basically put them together through the greenie. So the longer wire comes through the top, and then it twists the other two together in here. And then you would basically connect it to your ground. So that's how you would basically set it up. So you have your line hot, which is going to be here, right? So we've screwed that in. We have that pigtail neutral going in the same. So that's going in the bottom as well. Then you're hooking up your ground, which is down here. And that should basically get you where you need to be. If you go to put your power back on, and I would also say, like, before you put your power back on, screw this in a little bit into the box. Not too much, because then you have to basically work to unscrew the whole thing again. And, I basically use a flathead. At times I do use a motorized, drill. But you can also strip these screws too, which is a problem. So it's probably safer just to use this. But go ahead and just put it like a little bit into the box, so that, if you have to basically undo it, turn your power off, and then like work with your wires again, you're not like sitting there for like 2 minutes trying to unscrew it, because it does get a little annoying. But go ahead and put it in your box with everything connected. You've checked to make sure that you're not getting any slippage from, these ports on your line side. So red, hot line going into the line side, neutral pigtailed going into the line neutral white side. Everything's screwed in nice and tight. You have your ground connected. Go back to your box, flip it back on. And then what you should see, if everything was set up correctly, is in this model, a green indicator will just be static. So you'll know that it's on. If it's red, then it's probably an indication that you had a situation where this wasn't screwed in tight enough, this wasn't screwed in tight enough, your ground's not connected, something isn't properly making contact in your outlet. Or, you might have this might be loose, right? So like you didn't get good contact here. Like these two might be tight, this one didn't get braided and make a connection on the pigtail, right? So like there could be multiple issues as to why that wouldn't work. Shut off your power, check again, always check. Make sure your hots aren't indicating red, that they're always static green. If that's the case, unscrew it, check it, make sure that you're pulling on these up. I got a disconnected wire here. I got to make that tighter, right? So tight, tight, tight. Maybe up, I didn't tighten this one enough. Let me go ahead and, give this, another good tight screw. A lot of times what'll happen is you think that you screw this in enough and you're like getting a resistance, or okay, that's good. It's actually just the screw got stuck. So that's something to look out for as well. But what I typically, would do is just unscrew it a little bit and then make sure I have, a really good hard press where that's in there. And then I'll screw it in again and check it just to really make sure I'm locked in. All right. So then, you can go back to your box, turn it back on. If all that's good to go and everything's hooked up right, then, you should be in a good spot with getting this, working. But the key is to make sure that you cap your two blacks to continue that equilibrium, right, on this 120 volts. And then this 120 volts, which is coming off of a different breaker, is going directly into your outlet. and then you're pigtailing your neutrals, whether it's with a cap or it's with one of those pigtail adapters, that's good to go. And then same thing on your ground, that you have them locked in together so that you have, everything grounded and there's no break in that. And then that's all feeding into your bottom screw. All right. So hopefully that helped. I know I've seen, on forums when I was doing some research on this, trying to figure it out, that some people said, oh yeah, you know what? You don't need that red. It's a light switch, or it goes to a ceiling fan. Just go ahead and cap it off. Doesn't work. And in that case, if you were to do that, if you were to put a cap on here, right, there would be no pigtails because this is now not in play. If this wire didn't exist, let's say that, let's pretend that's not there, and all you have is your line black, your line white, your line ground, and then your load hot, your load white, and then your load ground. That's when you use your load in your line, right? So again, same thing. You're putting your load in the bottom, hot, neutral, so black, neutral, and then on top, you're putting your load black, hot, and then white, neutral, and then that'll continue the circuit. But when you have this multi-circuit wiring, that's where it causes an imbalance in the current, and it oversurges the volts, the amps, the ohms, whatever it is. I'm not an electrician, but one of those three, or maybe a combination of the three of them, it oversurges the outlet, and it causes a break in your fuse. So that's why, in order to keep it balanced, you have to have these two together and then a single hot going in with these going into line as well. So if you think about like a non-GFCI receptacle, that's essentially how it would be set up anyway, where you would have to basically put the red in, and then you would have to put these two together and then pigtail these. So you're basically doing the same exact thing, just here. It's a little bit more intimidating because of the line and the load, where you think, oh man, like I have a multi-circuit, how do I handle this? It's not as straightforward as like a regular outlet. Well, it basically is the same thing. You just ignore your load and you only use your line. In this case, my line's at the bottom. But again, always make sure you're checking what is your line, what is your load. And on a multi-circuit, only use the line, where again, pigtailing the neutrals, using the red as your hot line in, and then you're good to go. And then you're basically just running you're completing your connection for the black hot on that 120 by just capping the two. So hopefully that helped. And electricians, feel free to comment and correct anything I messed up. I'm not an electrician by any means. This is not electrical advice. Putting the disclaimers out there, but this is what worked for me, so I just wanted to share my experience. And yeah, look forward to reading the comments in the chats. Thanks.